I got home from a 2-week field project and found a shiny new clubhouse sitting on my land, complete with a banner that read Karen's Kingdom Grand Opening, folding chairs staked into my garden beds, a bubbling hot tub where my bird feeder used to be, and a porta-potty labeled Queen's Throne. That alone was wild. But what truly blew a gasket in my brain was seeing a crowd of HOA members raising wine glasses and cheering as someone made a speech on my makeshift barbecue pit. That barbecue pit had been built with my late grandfather, brick by brick. And now Karen from the HOA was using it to host a sangria and spinach dip ribbon cutting for a building I didn't authorize, on land she didn't own, with a DJ booth powered by an extension cord plugged into my outdoor socket. That was the moment I realized they had declared war. And they had no clue who they were messing with. 2 weeks earlier, I had packed up my truck and left town to manage a remote construction site in the Rockies. I'm a licensed structural engineer, but I also run a small equipment rental business that my family has owned for 3 generations. I like the quiet up in the mountains. No HOA meetings, no passive-aggressive newsletters, no one demanding that my trash can be an inch to the left. My neighborhood, unfortunately, wasn't as peaceful. When I moved in 5 years ago, there was no HOA. It was a nice, loose-knit community. But then, about a year ago, the HOA formed after a group of retirees decided the neighborhood needed structure. Karen, naturally, became president. She had the time, the audacity, and a personalized clipboard that said, "Head of Order." Now, the land in question, the land they had just built their wannabe palace on, wasn't just any plot. It was a half-acre lot that my grandfather left me in his will. It sat 2 blocks down from my house and served as a quiet community green space. Over the years, I'd added benches, planters, and even a rainwater collection system. Kids used to play tag there. Neighbors hosted low-key get-togethers, and no one had ever complained. But recently, Karen had been eyeing it with the hunger of a mall developer in the early 2000s. She once suggested turning it into a neighborhood meditation space, and offered to co-own it in exchange for HOA points, whatever that meant. I politely declined. Apparently, she took that as a challenge. I parked in front of the chaos and got out of my truck, scanning the scene with disbelief. They'd poured concrete, built walls, wired in lights. They even had a dumb little HOA HQ sign mounted above the entrance. I marched straight toward the action, nearly knocking over a table full of lukewarm veggie platters. Karen spotted me from the other side of the crowd and lit up with that Cheshire cat grin of hers, the kind that makes you want to throw a pineapple through a window. "Oh, look who's back," she chirped. "Perfect timing. We were just about to elect our social subcommittee." I didn't say a word. Just stood there, blinking at her like she was speaking in Morse code. "You built this?" I finally asked, my voice flat with disbelief. "Well, we didn't build it," she said with air quotes. "We manifested it. The community wanted a shared space, and your lot was the most neglected. It was basically abandoned. I had half a mind to manifest a bulldozer right then and there." "You do realize this is private property?" I asked, voice tightening. Karen gave a little laugh and waved her hand like she was shooing away a fly. "Oh, sweetie, that's what you used to think. But we actually had the land reviewed. The HOA voted last month to repurpose and used lots for the benefit of all. You were gone, and the vote was unanimous." "Unanimous? Who was voting?" "Well, just the board," she admitted, "but we represent the community." "And what about the deed? The title? The county zoning office?" She blinked. "I mean, we printed a map. It's right here." She pulled out a binder full of laminated nonsense. I glanced at the pages. It was a satellite image from Google Maps with her handwriting in sharpest circling my lot and labeling it HOA Shared Zone. There was no seal. No signature. Just glitter stickers and a post-it note that said, "Yay. Karen, you can't just draw a circle around someone's property and claim it." "Don't be difficult," she said with a strained smile. "We're not taking it away from you. You're welcome to join the clubhouse for a small monthly fee." This woman had just bulldozed my heritage barbecue pit, poured concrete over my strawberry patch, and turned my sanctuary into a snack-fueled nightmare. And now she wanted me to pay for access. At that point, one of her lackeys came over with a clipboard and asked if I wanted to sign up for karaoke night. I think that's when I blacked out from sheer rage. I walked away before I said or did something that would require bail money. But as I sat in my truck, staring at the idiocy before me, something cold and calculating took over. These people thought they were above the law. They thought I'd just accept it. But they didn't know I had access to every machine that made their little clubhouse possible, and every machine that could take it right back down. They thought they'd built their castle on victory. They didn't realize it was built on my land. And I owned the wrecking balls. The next morning, I was up at 6 with a mug of black coffee, staring at my grandfather's old deed like it was a treasure map. The property line was clear as daylight. That clubhouse, Karen's kingdom or whatever she wanted to call it, sat smack dab in the middle of my legally owned land. There was no ambiguity, no loophole, no technicality to exploit. I pulled up the county assessor's website, plugged in my parcel number, and verified it again. Paid in full. No liens. No zoning disputes. Just a whole lot of entitled hubris layered in stucco, LED string lights, and HOA delusion. It took less than 10 minutes on the phone with the zoning office to confirm that no permits had been filed. No notices were posted. No inspections. Nothing. The construction had been entirely unauthorized, which meant I was legally entitled to remove it. I could have gone the long, painful route, lawyers, cease and desist letters, back and forth paperwork, months of waiting. But that wasn't really my style. When someone builds a monument to their own arrogance on your land, you don't take them to brunch and talk about feelings. You take action. You demolish it politely and thoroughly. I called up Dave, one of my oldest friends and longtime site supervisor for our family's equipment yard. He answered on the second ring with a groggy, "What did Karen do now?" "She built a clubhouse on my lot." Pause. "Like a tent?" "No. Like a concrete foundation, walls, a hot tub, and a sign." Another pause. "Is it bad that I'm not surprised?" "She labeled the porta-potty Queen's Throne, Dave." "Oh. That's war." By noon, I was standing at our equipment yard outside town, where we store all the machinery not currently in use. I walked past the excavators and forklifts until I got to the real stars, the bulldozers. Big, orange, angry metal beasts with names we had stenciled onto the sides like battle tanks. There was Daisy, the gentle one, Hank, the stubborn one, and Carl, the absolute tank of the bunch. Carl had flattened half a hill during a landslide cleanup in 2020 and hadn't blinked since. I placed my hand on Carl's frame, looked at the row of steel giants before me, and said softly, "Time to go home, boys." That night, I typed up a cease and desist letter. Short, professional, and legally airtight. I cited the deed, noted the zoning violations, and gave them 48 hours to vacate the premises and remove the structure. I even included a copy of the land survey and the most up-to-date parcel map. No threats, no drama. Just facts, signed and notarized. I dropped it in Karen's mailbox the next morning, along with a printed photo of the bulldozers and a sticky note that said, "You might want to move the wine cooler." By afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered and braced myself. "Is this the guy threatening to destroy the community center?" I blinked. "Who is this?" "This is Richard from the HOA Legal Committee. We've received your letter, and I must say it seems wildly inappropriate." "Inappropriate how?" "You can't just bulldoze a structure because you don't like it." "It's not about liking it, Richard. It's on my land. Illegally." "Well, that's debatable." "No, it's not. You can look up the parcel online." "Here, I'll wait." There was silence. Then some clacking on a keyboard. Then more silence. "Okay," he said, voice deflating. "But the HOA voted on it. We had a quorum. and that means nothing legally. Still, there are other options: mediation, arbitration. Tell that to the hot tub sitting on top of my fire pit. Click. I figured that would buy them a day or two to panic. But I underestimated just how far Karen's denial ran. That evening, I drove by the lot to see if they had started moving anything. Instead, I found Karen hosting a wine and cheese feedback circle on the clubhouse patio, with a table covered in pamphlets about community cohesion. She even had the nerve to tape my cease and desist letter to the wall and write, "Fear-mongering isn't neighborly," across it in pink marker. A neighbor spotted me and whispered that Karen was telling everyone I was an unstable loner who wanted to destroy community values. She had even added a line about how I once threatened a squirrel, which was slander. I had merely discouraged it from chewing my phone line. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't even approach. I just stood across the street, arms crossed, watching Karen toast to progress, with a glass of boxed white wine and a plate of sweaty cheese cubes. She thought this was a standoff, that I'd blink first. But I didn't get into engineering because I liked blinking. At dawn the next day, I sent my demo notice to the city just to be thorough. No one contested it, of course. I scheduled the demolition for Saturday, giving them a few more days to move their tiki torches and patio chairs. Meanwhile, I put my team on alert. Dave coordinated the equipment transport. Carl was loaded onto the flatbed with the reverence of a knight preparing for battle. I even rented 2 porta-johns for my own crew and labeled them King's Throne and Not Karen's. Then came the cherry on top. Karen, not content with slandering me to the neighbors, decided to mail me a fine. Yes, a fine. A $500 penalty for hostile behavior and refusal to collaborate with the HOA vision. The envelope came with an actual invoice and a copy of the HOA bylaws, most of which were clearly written in Comic Sans and referenced things like emotional landscaping. I framed the fine and hung it in my garage, right above my grandfather's old hammer. Saturday arrived crisp and clear. Blue skies. Slight breeze. Ideal weather for demolition. As the bulldozers rolled down the street at 7 a.m. sharp, engines humming, a crowd began to gather. Kids pointed. Neighbors emerged with coffee mugs and lawn chairs. Karen stood frozen on the clubhouse steps, mouth agape, hair in rollers, still clutching a mimosa. I stepped out of my truck in full construction gear, clipboard in hand, and offered her a nod. 48 hours came and went, I said. You didn't move it. So now we are. She sputtered. You can't do this. I handed her a copy of the deed, the zoning documents, and the demolition notice. You built a clubhouse on my property. I gave you a chance to take it down yourself. This is just me cleaning up. Carl's engine revved like it was hungry, and Karen finally realized she wasn't in charge anymore. The first wall came down like a cardboard box under a bowling ball. Carl surged forward with the slow, methodical confidence of a machine that knew it was born to destroy. Dust puffed into the air as concrete cracked and splintered. The patio furniture tumbled like bowling pins. A cheap folding table was flung sideways, spinning end over end until it collided with a lawn gnome that Karen had perched on the edge of what used to be my herb garden. The hot tub buckled with a loud pop, sloshing water in all directions as it tipped sideways and crashed to the ground, sending a geyser into the sky that rained down like the world's saddest champagne spray. Karen screamed. It wasn't even words at first, just raw, high-pitched outrage as she flailed toward me in a floral bathrobe and slippers. You're insane. You're destroying community property. I didn't even look at her. I just checked off the first section on my clipboard and motioned for Daisy to start on the rear end of the building. Behind her, a growing crowd of neighbors stood frozen, phones held up like lighters at a concert. Some of them were clearly filming. A few were laughing. One guy brought popcorn. It was turning into a full-blown event. Dave stood by the fence, grinning like a proud dad at a science fair, while another crew member handed out ear protection to kids who had wandered closer. Even the city inspector I'd invited showed up early and stood off to the side, nodding approvingly as he jotted notes into a little black notebook. Karen rushed to intercept the inspector, waving her arms like an airport marshal. "Do something. This is vandalism. Illegal destruction of HOA property." He calmly adjusted his glasses and said, "Ma'am, this demolition is permitted, authorized, and being conducted by the property owner on his own land. What's illegal is the structure that was put up here without a single city filing. But we're a community. We voted. We had events scheduled. There's a birthday party tonight. Well, I suggest you relocate the bouncy house," he said without missing a beat. She turned purple. While the front wall crumbled under Carl's slow push, Dave and the crew began hauling away the debris. I made sure everything was done safely and by the book. After all, I wasn't just cleaning up an unauthorized clubhouse, I was making a point. The HOA had waltzed onto my land like they were monarchs and I was the peasant. They thought they could do whatever they pleased and hide behind clipboards and bylaws. But this was the real world, and in the real world, you can't build your wine-sipping palace on someone else's dirt and expect them to thank you for it. Karen continued to hover, trying to block the equipment with her body until someone, not me, not even a crew member, but one of her own board members, gently pulled her aside and whispered something to her. She froze, stiffened, then slowly turned and marched away toward her house, clutching her robe closed with both fists like she was retreating from a battlefield. The neighbors parted for her in silence, and no one clapped. That silence was probably more devastating to her than anything Carl could do with a 10-ton blade. The remaining structure didn't last long. With Daisy and Hank working the sides and Carl pushing from the front, the entire building was reduced to rubble by lunchtime. What used to be a smugly decorated HOA clubhouse was now a neatly organized pile of debris, sorted and loaded into dumpsters. The banner that once read Karen's Kingdom Grand Opening had been torn in half and was now dangling from a tree branch like some post-apocalyptic party favor. When the job was done, I walked the perimeter with the inspector to verify everything was cleared. He gave a nod of approval and signed off on the final form. Dave slapped me on the back and said, "That might have been the most satisfying thing I've seen all year." One of the kids in the crowd yelled, "Do it again!" and I laughed. As the crowd dispersed, I caught sight of a few neighbors who had always kept their distance, now approaching with smiles and cautious admiration. A woman from down the street thanked me for finally standing up to the madness. Another guy asked if he could borrow one of the dumpsters to toss out a rotting shed the HOA had fined him for. People were waking up. Karen's reign had thrived on fear and fake rules, but now they'd seen that she could be challenged, and knocked over like the lopsided clubhouse she had built without permission. Then came the sirens. Karen had apparently called the police. Again. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing but sirens off, and a pair of officers stepped out looking about as interested as people checking into a dentist appointment. One of them was Officer Daniels, who I happened to know personally. We'd worked together when I consulted on the structural redesign of the local police precinct. "Hey Rick," he said, tipping his hat. "I'm guessing this is your demolition?" "Fully permitted," I said, already holding out the paperwork. He glanced it over, nodded, then turned to Karen, who had reappeared with her arms crossed and lips pursed so tight she could have cracked a walnut. "Ma'am," Daniels said, "everything here checks out." "This is criminal," she barked. "He destroyed our property." "No, ma'am. He removed an illegal structure from his land." But we had events scheduled." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a permit for the building?" Karen hesitated. "Do you have a deed, zoning approval, or even a construction notice filed with the city?" More silence. He looked back at me, trying not to smirk. "Nice work, Rick. You do cleanup jobs too?" I chuckled. "Only when the mess builds itself." As the officers left, I could see Karen trembling. Her empire had fallen in a matter of hours, not by rage or vandalism, but by cold, undeniable facts and a few £1,000 of metal justice. She had overstepped, and for once, someone had stepped back harder. Later that day, I went home, tired but satisfied, and took a long shower. I didn't feel victorious. I felt restored. This wasn't just about a building, it was about drawing a line. A very clear, very legally documented line that said, "This is mine. You don't get to take it." But little did I know, Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Because while the clubhouse was gone, her ego wasn't. And she was about to take her tantrum to court. The envelope arrived 3 days later, thick and dramatic, hand-delivered with the urgency of a ceasefire agreement. It was marked with bold lettering that read, "Legal action enclosed," and sealed with a sticker that had the HOA's ridiculous emblem, an oak tree with a smiley face in the middle. I opened it while drinking coffee on my porch, already suspecting what was inside. Sure enough, it was a demand letter from a lawyer, well, sort of a lawyer. Chad Brenshaw, ESQ, according to the letterhead. I knew Chad. Everyone did. He was Karen's nephew, fresh out of law school and about as intimidating as a wet sponge. He once tried to sue a local bakery for not offering gluten-free croissants, despite not having a gluten allergy. That case lasted about 4 hours. Still, the letter was a sight to behold. Full of bold threats and completely made-up legal jargon, it accused me of malicious destruction of community property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, public nuisance, and, in one baffling paragraph, civic betrayal. I didn't even know what that meant. He demanded $500,000 in damages, a public apology, and that I rebuild the clubhouse using HOA-approved materials. There was even a hand-drawn sketch at the back of what the new clubhouse should look like. It included a second-floor yoga studio, a juice bar, and something called Karen's Reading Nook of Tranquility. I nearly spit out my coffee. Now, under normal circumstances, a legal letter from a licensed attorney would give anyone pause. But this one was so drenched in delusion that I actually laughed out loud. They were suing me for tearing down a structure illegally built on land I owned. A structure that never had permits, inspections, or even a legitimate vote from the community. Still, I didn't want to take any chances, so I called my lawyer, Linda. Linda was a professional nightmare, stoic, brilliant, and allergic to nonsense. She once cross-examined a city official so thoroughly he quit mid-trial and opened a taco truck in Costa Rica. I forwarded her the letter, and 10 minutes later, she called. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, clearly amused. Did they really use the phrase, civic betrayal? Right above the part where they demand I rebuild the hot tub, I replied. She exhaled hard. Let me handle it. True to her word, she filed a counterclaim within 48 hours. Trespassing, unauthorized use of private property, illegal construction, destruction of personal assets, including the garden and irrigation system, and damage to sentimental fixtures. We were asking for damages, attorney fees, and an order forcing the HOA to formally acknowledge liability. Linda made it clear in the filing that we weren't just defending. We were flipping the whole situation upside down. Karen, of course, doubled down. She turned the HOA newsletter into a one-woman smear campaign, writing editorials about the reckless neighbor who hates community, and inserting pictures of herself with pouting expressions next to the ruins of the clubhouse. She even tried to rally support by promising to hold HOA meetings in her living room while the legal injustice played out in court. But the support wasn't what she expected. Neighbors were starting to ask questions, like why she built the clubhouse without any notice, why she used HOA funds on something that was never approved by vote, why the wine budget had mysteriously ballooned in the last 2 months. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than expected. Small claims court. Nothing flashy. Just a judge, a few rows of seating, and the distinct aroma of industrial carpet cleaner. I wore a clean button-up and brought copies of everything. Title deed, survey maps, photos of the structure before and after, and permits for the demolition. Linda showed up with a single briefcase and a look on her face that said she had already won. Chad arrived 10 minutes late, dragging a rolling suitcase and sweating through his sport coat. Karen was right behind him, dressed like she was heading to a royal funeral. She glared at me like I had personally poisoned her petunias. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, called us to order. Chad launched into his argument first. He used phrases like communal spirit, inviolable civic space, and at one point even tried quoting a passage from a self-help book about neighborhood unity. He waved his hands dramatically and referred to me as the demolition aggressor. When the judge asked him if he had documentation for the structure's approval, he hesitated, then produced the same map I'd seen weeks ago, the one printed from Google with Sharpie drawings and glitter. The judge stared at it in silence for a good 10 seconds. Then she turned to me. I calmly presented my documentation. Deed. Zoning confirmation. Proof of lack of permit. Permits for demolition. A notarized statement from the city inspector. I even brought video footage of the construction process, which clearly showed HOA members working without any safety equipment or inspection signs. When the judge asked Karen if she'd ever posted a notice of construction or contacted the city, she muttered something about community mandates and tried to redirect by blaming me for not being around to stop them. The judge's eyebrows went up at that. Linda, bless her heart, kept it all brief and devastating. She simply said, "My client is not liable for removing a structure that was illegally placed on his land. The HOA acted unilaterally, without permission or process, and is now trying to punish him for enforcing his rights." In the end, the judge didn't need much time. She ruled in my favor. The HOA was ordered to pay for the damages to my property, including removal costs and legal fees. The claim against me was dismissed entirely. Karen looked like she was going to cry. Chad looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. The judge added that if the HOA ever attempted similar construction without permits, the city would pursue criminal charges. Outside the courtroom, Karen tried one last time to save face. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll regret embarrassing this community." I smiled and said, "No, Karen. I'm cleaning it up." And then I walked away, listening to the sweet sound of her nephew trying to convince her that an appeal would definitely work this time. After the court ruling, something shifted in the neighborhood. It was like the veil had been lifted and everyone could finally see the HOA for what it was, a glorified high school clique with too much time, not enough power, and one delusional queen bee at the center. The clubhouse was gone, Karen's lawsuit had blown up in her face, and her public image had taken a nosedive straight into a puddle of lukewarm hummus. But I wasn't done. Not out of spite, though I'll admit there was a tiny bit of petty satisfaction swirling around in there. No, I wasn't done because I wanted to make sure it never happened again. If Karen could try to steal land once, she, or someone like her, could try it again. And the best way to make sure people remember a boundary is to do something memorable with it. So I started rebuilding the lot. Not into a clubhouse, not into anything commercial or glamorous, but into something simple, loud, and undeniably mine. I converted the area into a small community chicken sanctuary. I'm talking full-on coops, roosting boxes, dust baths, and a pecking zone with little enrichment toys. A neighbor down the street donated a few hens she couldn't care for anymore. Another offered feed. Pretty soon, I had a dozen chickens clucking around, laying eggs and patrolling the perimeter like feathered security guards. But I didn't stop there. I painted the largest coop with bright colors and added a mural, Karen's face, cartoon style, wide-eyed and glaring, surrounded by speech bubbles of her greatest hits. "This is community property. You'll regret this. You owe us a yoga studio." Underneath it, I wrote in big bold letters, "No trespassing." The coop became a local landmark. People took selfies with it. Someone added it to Google Maps as Karen's Coop of Consequences. It was glorious. At first, Karen didn't respond. Maybe she was licking her wounds or waiting for her nephew to come up with another legal theory based on astrology. But then, one day, she walked by the lot while I was refilling the water stations and just stood there, arms crossed, watching the chickens with what I could only describe as offended disbelief. "You've turned this into a zoo," she muttered. "Free eggs for the neighborhood," I replied. "Much better than wine and HOA fees." She made a noise like she'd swallowed a lemon and stomped off. But the neighborhood? They loved it. Kids came by after school to watch the chickens. Seniors from 2 blocks over brought their lawn chairs. Someone even started bringing kitchen scraps to contribute. I set up a little sign with egg pickup times and a donation jar. It became a peaceful gathering spot. Everything Karen had claimed her clubhouse would be, except this one didn't break any laws or property lines. A month later, something even better happened. I got a letter from the mayor's office. Apparently, the city had received multiple reports, not complaints but compliments, about the chicken sanctuary and the legal demolition of an illegal structure. They invited me to a community leadership luncheon to recognize residents who had contributed positively to neighborhood development. I laughed when I saw the invite, but I went anyway, mostly out of curiosity. The food was surprisingly good. The mayor shook my hand and said, "We need more people like you who aren't afraid to stand up to petty tyranny." His words, not mine. Then he told me the city was forming a local advisory board on neighborhood zoning and planning, and they wanted me to be a part of it. I said yes. Back in the neighborhood, the tide had fully turned. The HOA started to unravel. With the failed lawsuit, wasted funds, and public embarrassment, Karen's grip on power began to loosen. Residents started asking questions at meetings. Where had the money gone? Why were decisions made without votes? Why did Chad keep showing up and quoting legal cases that didn't exist? Within weeks, a motion to dissolve the HOA was submitted and passed in a landslide vote. Karen tried to filibuster with a speech about the moral decay of suburban unity, but no one was listening. Someone actually turned off her mic mid-sentence. The HOA was officially disbanded, its funds redistributed to neighborhood improvement grants, and all remaining bylaws voided. Karen's kingdom had fallen. This time, for good. I marked the occasion by planting a new tree at the edge of the chicken lot. A young oak, in honor of the one that had been drawn with a smiley face on all those ridiculous HOA newsletters. Beneath it, I placed a plaque that read, "In memory of misused authority." In the weeks that followed, life returned to something better than normal. The neighborhood felt freer, lighter, more human. No more weird fines for mailbox decorations. No more passive-aggressive emails about lawn height. Just people living, cooperating, and occasionally tossing their leftover kale to the chickens. Karen still lived on the block, but she kept to herself. Occasionally, I'd catch her peeking out the window as someone snapped a photo with the chicken mural or took a carton of eggs. She never said anything, never tried another stunt. Her clipboard disappeared. Her power was gone. Whatever fire she had left, it burned quietly behind lace curtains. As for me, I kept going. I added solar lights, a rain catchment barrel, and even a bench with carved initials from neighbors who helped out. The lot became what it had always wanted to be, a place for people, not power. A place rooted in the community, not imposed on it. I didn't need titles or newsletters or subcommittees. I just needed my land, a clear boundary, and a firm understanding that when people cross the line, you don't just draw it again. You bulldoze it into memory. And then you build something better,